Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video.
Worst way to catch a cheating wife. The following will be long since it happened some years ago, and I just recently felt moved to share it after reading so many stories and personal experiences on this website. It is my goal that my story can be of assistance to someone else who is dealing with infidelity. My ex-wife and I were married for almost 20 years before our divorce. Prior to meeting him, I worked as a professional firefighter. Having graduated high school at the age of 17 and enrolled in fire academy with a parent waiver, I am the fourth generation of firefighters. I worked my way up to battalion chief before requesting a demotion back to rescue captain of the rescue squad in my department, since that was where all of my certifications and other credentials were located. On one occasion, we received a call on Christmas Eve about a structural fire in an apartment building. When we got on the scene, we discovered that 18 persons had gone missing. We began rescue efforts and were able to identify a young couple and their wife in a single unit. A young girl seated with medics started shouting, my baby," as soon as I took them out. While a tender changed my oxygen bottle, I was distracted by a young lady screaming, my baby, my baby." I dashed up to her and asked her, "Ma'am, what kind of kid I was looking for, a dog, a cat, a human, or something else?" The only thing she kept repeating was my baby, so I dashed back in after her. I came from the building a short time later with a baby, and as I was making my way out, something inside the structure exploded, debris everywhere. Unexpectedly, I was hit in the back by a big splinter of wood. As soon as I got to the triage area, I fell. I had given up the baby. Then I saw the message splinter was detected hanging out of my mouth. Then I was flown by helicopter to a trauma center, where I passed out twice and was brought back to consciousness before being rushed into emergency surgery. My heart had been pierced by a splinter, and I was on the verge of death. My wife was called by my team to notify her of what had transpired, and she told them that she would not be attending since she had more important things to do than worry about my ploy for her attention and how I was attempting to get into her trousers while at work. The hospital kept me for 30 days because they wouldn't let me go until they were pleased that I was healthy enough to return home, which was in a very rural location around 60 miles from where I worked and had a genuine hospital. When I was released, I begged my wife to transport me to the top, but she stated she didn't have the time to make the trip. To go home, I had to beg for a lift from one of my crew members, who led me inside my house to make sure I wasn't alone. We were walking through my house looking for my wife because her minivan was parked in the driveway, and as I unlocked our bedroom door, I fell to my knees as my crew member rushed up behind me and exclaimed, "Are you doing?" We were walking through my house looking for my wife because her minivan was parked in the driveway. When we opened the door to my bedroom, we found my wife in bed with a person under her kitty, another behind her in her buttocks, and a third in her mouth. First and foremost, I was taken aback by the one in her buttocks and mouth, something she had never done with me and which I had never tried since I was too large and would suffocate her or otherwise damage her. My buddy helped me out of the car and then went inside the store to purchase some clothes for me to take with me. He picked me up and brought me to the home of another buddy, where we spoke about what had transpired. Afterward, when I apprehended her, my friend told me that when he came into the room to retrieve something for me, the ex and her boy toys didn't stop what they were doing, and he was able to take cell phone film without them knowing it. In less than a week, my friend supported me in finding a lawyer and initiating the divorce process. Fortunately, our children were now adults, and we didn't have to put them through that divorce ordeal, since I found in court that everyone in our social circle was getting a portion of my wife's inheritance except me. She confessed in front of the court that she was doing every man in town, that I was nothing more than a paycheck, and that she always hoped I would die in the line of duty so that she could collect the $1 million life insurance policy we had in case I was killed on the job. I remember when we first met and throughout our lives, she was always kind and naive, and she was a little slow in many things, but when her mother lost everything and moved in with us for a while, that's when my wife began to change. Her mother did not live in the same house the whole time because we acquired a little building and turned it into a tiny cottage on the back end of our property so that we could have more privacy. And it was only after I moved her mother out back that I saw the changes in her. Because she refused to work, I had to work double shifts and, at times, a second job to support the 5 of us. Because I was the only one working, it was difficult for me to recognize red flags and other warning signs. She worked 48 hours a day with 24 hours off. The typical schedule is 24 hours on, 48 hours off. My family consists of my wife, 2 children, my mother-in-law, and myself. Since capturing her, the home has been sold, and everything that was formerly considered joint property has been divided, sold, and split again, and so on. My crew has rallied behind me, being there to assist me when I want it, as well as to assist me in regaining duty status, as well as to be there when I require someone to chat to, and so on. Because the vast majority of the men and women on my team lived in the city where we worked, it took them at least an hour each way to come and assist me. I worked really hard to recapture my career. My goal was to complete 35 years of service and then retire. I was successful. After completing my physical and returning to duty, I was called to the chief's office, where I was instructed that I had two alternatives. Captain, you have two possibilities. 1. You may retire at 30 years old and keep your full pension and benefits. Or 2. We will medically retire you and give you half of your pension and perks. I stumbled through my re-entry examinations, but I passed. Captain, you are not the most skilled firefighter I have ever met, but because of your age, injury history, and recent diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, paired with bipolar disorder, your insurance company will no longer cover you because you pose a significant danger to others. So, do you have a choice in the matter? I was depressed and dejected when I decided to resign. I quit the area and began working in animal rescue to pass the time when my now ex-wife discovered what had happened. It was the lowest point in my life. Everyone turned me down for a job because I was living in an RV trailer and running an animal sanctuary. Certainly, I didn't have to work, but I needed to get something done. I swore off women, with the exception of my sister, who is a firefighter, and I didn't socialize, date, or do anything else for a very long time after that. And I was convinced that I would never be in a relationship again, and that I would never be able to place my faith in anybody else. I started playing one of those massively multiplayer online role-playing games and met a woman. We chatted and eventually exchanged numbers. Then 18 months later she decided she wanted to meet me and told me there was no way urine or anything because no one would invest this much time picking a target. This made me laugh harder than I'd ever laughed in my entire life, and she was right. Even though we had a 20-year age difference, we were of different races, and interracial relationships are still frowned upon where I live. Yeah, it's Redneckville, USA, and we're really living in the Stone Age in many respects. She asked if I would meet her. It was a fantastic learning experience. I can say with complete certainty that she was the finest choice I've ever made. She was all and more that I could have hoped for and more. In the same way that I was raised, she was taught that a woman's primary obligations were to her husband and family, rather than to money or a professional job. She was just incorrect. Women who work are welcome, but family should always take precedence over any other endeavor, regardless of their gender. A little irony exists in the fact that I lost my father during the Vietnam War and that I am now married to a Vietnamese lady who is expecting our first child in November 2021. It is heinous, and it is maybe the most terrible thing we will ever have to endure in our life. Please keep in mind, though, that if anything like this occurs, it is not the end of the world. To make things worse, not all men and women are alike, as your unfaithful husband has discovered. Organize some time for yourself, get medical treatment, and rediscover your sense of self. Make sure you take your time and keep in mind that something greater is looking for you as well. Suicide should never, ever be considered an option. Making the decision to give up is just not an option. You have the capacity to rebuild your life and make it a better one since you are strong and resilient. It's important not to lose sight of the truth that life and love always find a way.